Greetings and salutations, friends and gamers of all stripe. My name is GM Dave, your man behind the screen, and I'd like to welcome you back to our revised 5th edition Dervish build. Now, for those of you who are coming to this video new, you might be a little bit confused why I'm calling this the revised version. So to clarify, I posted an original version of this video 2 days ago, but as one of my viewers kindly pointed out to me, I had actually made a few mistakes regarding the rules of multiclassing in 5th edition. I'm more familiar with 3.5 and Pathfinder when it comes to multiclassing. I've been playing those for a lot longer. So, for one, I found myself mixing up some of the Pathfinder rules of multiclassing into 5th edition. And for two, there was a couple small things that I misread that led me to put together this build in a way that I thought was necessary to make it work, that it turned out it wasn't, and also left the build a little bit less than as efficient as it could be. So, with all that out of the way, moving on, this is my build for how to recreate the Dervish Prestige class from 3.5 edition in 5e. So starting with our stats, we have a 27-point buy. Start with a strength of 10, costing us 2 points, just to pull any negatives away from any potential strength saves we might have to do. They happen frequently enough that I feel that's worthwhile. A dex of 16, costing us 7. We're actually putting it up to 14, but we get +2 from our race. Constitution of 14, costing us 7. Intelligence, we leave at 8. We don't need it, so we will leave it as our dump stat. Wisdom of 12, costing us 4. And a charisma of 15. Again, we get a racial +1, bringing that 14 up to 15, costing us 7. So our preferred race for this build is the Tabaxi, the catfolk of 5e. They give us charisma of +1 and dexterity of +2. Perfect, as we want those to be our primary and secondary stats. This build is going to be focused on using finesse and dex-based damage in melee, and also high movement. Plus, another big part of the Dervish was the charismatic side of things, as they were often built off of bards or rogues. They also get dark vision of 60 feet, fantastically useful ability, and feline agility is going to be a great way early on for helping to get those bursts of movement that you need that we're really defining for the class. Specifically, you get to double your movement anytime you wish. I believe it costs a bonus action, if I remember correctly. You double your movement speed for 1 round, and it refreshes only by standing still. All you have to do is not move for 1 round, and the following round, you can burst your speed again. So, very useful ability. Next up comes Cat's Claws, giving them a 20-foot climbing speed, which is going to make making climb checks considerably easier, and a natural slashing attack, which it comes in as a 1d4 and counts as a replacement for your unarmed strike. Now, note you can still close your fists and punch something, but hey, it's going to do less damage and be less effective than the slashing attack, which is going to be useful if by chance you should happen to get disarmed. Cat's Talent also gives you proficiency in perception and stealth, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. Languages are common, and one other of your choosing. I would say pick it dependent on the campaign you're playing. For our background, we're going to go with Entertainer. With this build, the background you pick isn't especially important, but I personally like the idea of going with the Entertainer, as that fits with the core fantasy of the original Dervish. They would literally dance around the battlefield, weaving their swings into their dance. So the Entertainer, I feel, really helps to kind of capture that aspect. That grants you proficiency with acrobatics, performance, the disguise kit, and 1 musical instrument of your choice. You also gain the By Popular Demand feature, which is going to be very nice, especially at early levels, for helping your party to get free room and board. All you have to do is perform in whatever place you're staying at. So to begin the build proper, we start with 3 levels in Rogue. Now, level 1 grants us proficiency with Persuasion, Deception, Intimidation, Athletics, and Thieves' Tools. I chose these skills specifically because the side thing we're doing, given that Charisma is our second highest stat, is acting as the party face. So we want to get those social skills. That's going to be where our out-of-combat strength lies. We also gain proficiency in Intelligence and Dexterity saving throws. Very useful with the dex save, especially the intelligence save. Not quite as much. There isn't that much out there that causes you to take intelligence saves, but getting that proficiency does negate that negative point in intelligence that we had from having it as an 8. In terms of equipment proficiency, we are proficient with light armor, simple weapons, hand crossbows, long swords, rapiers, and short swords. And we also gain our sneak attack at 1d6 and access to the Thieves' Cant secret language. Rogue level 2 gets us our cunning action, which is going to additionally help our ability to maneuver swiftly around the battlefield, another key fantasy of the Dervish, its high maneuverability. And at Rogue level 3, we take the Swashbuckler archetype, which is where we really start to feel the Dervish coming into play, particularly with its 2 third-level abilities, Fancy Footwork, which enables us to avoid opportunity attacks, and Rakish Audacity, which gives us a couple of decent things, nicest among them for combat being an entirely new way to gain sneak attacks. If you isolate an enemy that is 5 feet minimum away from all of its allies, and you are 5 feet minimum away from its ally or your allies and its allies, you can then trigger a sneak attack on that enemy. And at level 3, your sneak attack goes up to 2d6. Moving on from there, we take 3 levels in Fighter. Fighter level 1, we take our fighting style, and we are going to go with the Duelist fighting style. That is going to grant us a nice little +2 bonus on our attacks anytime we are wielding only a one-handed weapon, a single one-handed weapon. We also gain the Second Wind ability, which is going to be nice for helping us stay in our fights if and when we do end up taking some hits. Fighter 1 also brings us proficiency with medium and heavy armor, as well as shields, and much wanted proficiency with martial weapons, which is the important one that we will be grabbing. Furthermore, we move on to Fighter 2, which grants us the Action Surge ability. This is also going to be very nice for helping us to move around the battlefield and gain additional actions, something that's going to be very useful for helping us to keep our maneuverability high and potentially even get an extra attack or 2 in, should the situation allow it. Fighter 3 comes along, we take the Battle Master archetype, granting us the Combat Superiority ability. Through Combat Superiority, we get to select 3 special maneuvers that we can use, and we're going to take Evasive Footwork, Feinting Attack, and most importantly, for capturing the feel of the Dervish, Sweeping Attack. We're taking these 3 abilities specifically because Evasive Footwork and Feinting Attack provide us with both a nice bit of defense in terms of Evasive Footwork, and a nice way to boost our chance to hit with Feinting Attack. Feinting Attack, by using a bonus action to make a feint, gives us advantage on our attack that turn. Lastly, Sweeping Attack is a nice way to get an easy cleave on multiple enemies. These abilities use the Combat Supremacy's second portion, Supremacy Dice. We get 4 Supremacy Dice to use with our maneuvers. Anytime we use a maneuver, we expend one of our Supremacy Dice, and as a Battle Master fighter, the Supremacy Dice are a D8. These dice will oftentimes determine our damage with our abilities. Lastly, the Battle Master also gives us Student of War, which grants us proficiency with 1 set of artisan tools of our choice, a nice little way to increase our skill roster. Moving on from here, we take 6 more levels in Rogue. Rogue level 4 grants us our first stat upgrade or feat. In this case, we're going to take a feat. We will be selecting Defensive Duelist, allowing us to temporarily increase our armor class against attacks that get through to potentially deflect them. Rogue 5 grants us the amazing Uncanny Dodge ability, as well as 3d6 in our sneak attack, and Rogue 6 gives us our second tick in Expertise, which we will be taking Perception and either Thieves' Tools or Stealth, whichever you choose. Now, looking at it here, yes, I forgot to note that Rogue level 1, our Expertise will be taking with Persuasion and Intimidation. You can also take Deception if you would prefer, but I find that for this build, Intimidation would probably be a little more useful. So my apologies for missing that. Moving back on, Rogue level 7 grants us evasion, and our sneak attack goes up to 4d6. And Rogue level 8, we get our second feat, Mobile. Mobile is going to be the key feat for capturing that maneuverability that is so iconic for the Dervish. Our speed increases by 10 feet. Anytime we use the dash action, difficult terrain no longer costs us extra movement on that turn. Fantastic for use with the Rogue's earlier cunning action, which grants us a free use of the dash action with our bonus action. Lastly, the very nice thing here is anytime you make a melee attack against a creature when you have the mobile feat, you no longer provoke attacks of opportunity from that creature for the rest of the turn, regardless of whether or not you hit. Rogue 9 brings us our level 9 ability for the Swashbuckler Panache. This allows us to use a persuasion check contested by the creature's insight. They must be able to see and hear you, and they must understand a language that you're using. If you're successful versus a hostile creature, they gain disadvantage on attack rolls and cannot make opportunity attacks against anyone other than yourself. So you impose disadvantage on attacks from them against your party, and they can no longer make attacks of opportunity against your party members. Furthermore, if you're successful versus a non-hostile creature, you charm them for 1 minute, and for that time, they regard you as a friendly acquaintance. Lastly, your sneak attack goes up by 5d6. Moving on from here, we take 4 more levels in Fighter, and in so doing, we finish out our stint in Fighter. Fighter 4 brings us our next feat, which is the first of 2 Unearthed Arcana feats we will be taking. I will leave a small note on that after we go over these 2 feats regarding whether or not your DM is allowing Unearthed Arcana feats and alternatives you can take in their place. For this one, we are taking Acrobat. This will grant us +1 to our dex, bringing that up to 17. We will gain double proficiency bonus when using acrobatics, meaning that with our with our previous 2 choices in expertise, that now makes 5 skills which we get double proficiency bonus. Furthermore, we can attempt a DC 15 acrobatics check as a bonus action to ignore the movement penalty of difficult terrain. Very nice for if you have to use your cunning action for another thing, or if for whatever reason you are not able to dash in a particular round. This gives us another means with which we can ignore the movement penalties of difficult terrain. Fighter 5 gives us the very coveted extra attack, which is going to go a long ways into helping us capture that feel of being able to lash out at multiple creatures in 1 round. And Fighter 6 brings our second Unearthed Arcana feat, Performer, which grants us +1 Charisma, double proficiency bonus when using Performance, and we can attempt to distract a humanoid in sight while we are performing. By doing so, we force them to make an insight check against our performance. If they fail, they continue to make insight or perception checks against our performance at disadvantage, remaining transfixed so long as we continue performing and so long as they continue to fail their save. Now, since Performer and Acrobat are both Unearthed Arcana feats, there is no guarantee that your DM is going to allow it at your table. While I personally feel these are very balanced feats and there is no reason why they should not be included, just in case your DM does not include them, there are alternatives in the player's handbooks. For Acrobat, you can replace that instead with Athlete, take the +1 dex, and gain the benefits given therein. Not quite as useful, in my opinion, as Acrobat, but still certainly useful enough to be a worthwhile choice. And for Performer, you could replace that with Actor, giving yourself another aspect of out-of-combat usefulness and utility, just not in the same sense as Performer. Furthermore, you still get your +1 to Dex, bringing it up to 16. Or +1 to Charisma, excuse me. So after taking Fighter level 6, we move on to our final level in Fighter, level 7. We gain an additional upgrade to Combat Superiority here, granting us 2 more maneuvers and 1 more superiority die. For the 2 maneuvers, I'm recommending Disarming Attack and Parry, giving us additional means of defense useful for helping us to avoid damage and grant our party a little more utility by disarming certain enemies. Furthermore, we also gain the very useful Know Your Enemy ability, which allows us to better set ourselves up in those moments where you can take a minute in-game time to observe your enemy before an encounter. And now, finally, we finish off this build with 4 levels in Rogue. At Rogue 10, we gain another stat increase or choice of feat, but at this point, we've taken all the feats that we want, so we're going to put +2 to our dexterity, bringing that up to 19. Rogue 11 grants us the reliable talent ability, and our sneak attack goes up to 66, and Rogue 12 gets us yet another stat increase. We will gain +1 dex, maxing out our dex at 20, and +1 charisma, bringing it up to 17. Unfortunately, bringing it up to 17 means that we do not get a bonus to its modifier at that point. However, given that you're level 18, chances are pretty good you've gotten at least one item that can in some way boost your charisma, and if you haven't, well, it's simple enough to find a headband of charisma or something similar to give yourself that little boost. Finally, we finish off the build with our 13th level in Rogue, taking the Elegant Maneuver ability from the Swashbuckler, which gives us even more ways to avoid opportunity attacks and the like, and a sneak attack of 7d6. Now, going with the Tabaxi or taking the Duelist is not the only way to make this build work, and from here on, I'm going to list some additional build options that you can use to successfully use this build. To start with, we're going to look at another way that you can focus as the Dervish. Now, this build that I have done focuses more on the mobility and defensive side of the Dervish. However, we can take feats and fighting styles that will alter that and make us more offensive oriented. And to do that, it is as simple as at level 1 of Fighter, taking the 2-weapon style feat instead of the Duelist feat. This will allow us to more effectively fight with 2 weapons and increase our damage potential by permitting us to use our weapon's primary stat modifier in its damage for the offhand, which you normally cannot do, which means by wielding 2 finesse weapons at that level, you are going to be getting +3 damage to both of them. Very nice. Then at Rogue 4, instead of taking Defensive Duelist, we swap that out with the Dual Wielder feat, granting us a +1 bonus to our armor class anytime we are dual wielding, allowing us a greater opportunity to hit with our weapons and allowing us to draw and stow both weapons as a single action instead of one at a time. Furthermore, the Tabaxi are not the only race we have to go with to make this build work, and even though I feel personally that they are the best suited to the build, there are other very viable options, namely Human and Drow. Of those two, I feel that Human is the more viable of the two, particularly if you are going with the Human variant. So as an example, going from the variant, we gain +1 Dex and +1 Charisma, and proficiency with the Stealth skill. This will help to make up for the fact that as the Tabaxi, we will now be losing out on the Stealth skill. However, if you would prefer to get proficiency with Perception, equally fine. For the feat, you can slot any from the build into that point. I would recommend either slotting Mobility or preferably your defensive style feat, either being Defensive Duelist or Dual Wielder. When taking Athlete, like I mentioned, if you have to swap Athlete out for Acrobatic, you take the +1 Dex, and you can slot that in at any point. Furthermore, if you're taking Athlete, but your DM is not going to permit you to use Acrobat because it's an Unearthed Arcana feat, you can keep Athlete wherever it is you put it and just use the missing point to increase your Charisma by another 2 points. Moving on to the Drow, we gain the +2 Dex and +1 Charisma that the Tabaxi get, which makes it stat-wise perfect for this build. And we also gain an improved Dark Vision of 120 feet. Very nice to have. Keen Senses gives us proficiency in Perception automatically. Sadly, we do miss the Stealth proficiency. However, That's easy enough to take later on if you so desire. Fey Ancestry gives advantage on saves and immunity to, excuse me, Fey Ancestry gives advantage on saves against being charmed and immunity to magical sleep. And while I normally wouldn't include an ability like this as important to note, I feel that trance is important to note since a 4-hour meditation replaces your 8-hour sleep to gain long rest, meaning that if you are ambushed at night as a drow or really as any sort of elf, you have a little bit of an advantage in that chances are you're going to be easier, or you're going to have a much easier time avoiding exhaustion than the other races due to the fact that your rest is half the time. Finally, we gain drow magic and drow weapon training. Unfortunately, as a rogue, drow weapon training is pretty much baked into the class to begin with, so we don't really need to worry about that, but drow magic is still very nice to get. We automatically gain the Dancing Lights cantrip at level 1. Level 3 gives us Fairy Fire, and level 5 gives us Darkness, with Fairy Fire and Darkness both being usable once per long rest. Now, as useful as the drow can be in this build, something very important to note is there is a major drawback they receive that could come into play depending on the setting you're playing in. Sunlight sensitivity gives them disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks that rely on sight when you, the target of your attack, or whatever you're trying to perceive, are in direct sunlight. So if you're playing a game where you know there's going to be settings that have a lot of direct sun, you may want to strongly consider not playing the drow, as that disadvantage can break this build. Lastly, we move on to a few equipment suggestions. Since the build relies on higher mobility and it focuses on dexterity to allow it to both deal damage and protect itself from damage, you're going to want to go with finesse weapons and light armor. In terms of the light armor, studded leather is king. You don't want to go with anything other than that, really, unless it's magical. And generally speaking, even when it comes to magical armor, you don't want to go beyond light, since the reduction in dex in medium armor and the denial of dex in heavy armor, plus the slowing of your movement speed, is going to negatively impact this build in a huge way. And generally speaking, you will find that even magical armors will reduce your armor class if you break out of light armor because of how it impacts your dexterity. Weapon-wise, you're going to want to go with any finesse weapon really will do. Daggers, rapiers, scimitars, short swords, whips. My recommendation would be that if you're going for the duelist, take the rapier. Of the finesse weapons, it is the best single damage and will work very well for a one-handed build. For the two-weapon style, I would say any combination of two scimitars or short swords will work well. However, the scimitars will have to be held off on until you take your levels in fighter, as they are not granted to rogues for use. Furthermore, you do have the option, once you take the dual wielding feat, you could potentially go with double rapiers or something larger. Just make sure whatever you pick, even if it isn't considered light, like a scimitar or a short sword, whatever you select should still be a finesse weapon, even if you have the dual wielder feat, which could potentially allow you to freely dual wield even long swords. Finesse is key, as that will permit us to use our dexterity with the weapon's damage and attack. As far as range is concerned, there is no choice other than longbow that is really worth a damn, unless you find something magical that is better. Otherwise, longbows are the way to go. They provide the highest damage and the highest range of all ranged weapons. However, once again, since we're starting as rogue, the longbow is going to have to wait until you get fighter. Until that time, short bow or crossbow of some kind is doable. Lastly, where magic items go, really anything that increases your mobility or synergizes well with your dexterity and charisma skills would be fantastic choices. However, there are a couple items of note. Because this build is one that's also bound to draw a lot of attention your way due to the fact that you're going to be very good at isolating enemies and maneuvering around the battlefield, being very slippery and dealing precise damage, you're going to have a lot of people probably trying to grab you from a distance. As such, things like gloves of missile snaring are absolutely fantastic. as are the elven kind items, that being the cloak and the boots. Those are great for helping you to set up ambushes and avoid being detected before a fight starts, so that you can ensure a quick, easy sneak attack and a very successful ambush. Other than that, anything, like I said, that synergizes with your dexterity or charisma, or provides you what you need that fits within the previous equipment suggestions. Finesse weapons, light armor, an absolute must. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. What do you think about this build? Do you think this is an effective recreation of the Dervish from 3.5, or even the Dervish archetype from Pathfinder? Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. Again, I apologize for the screw up on the last video. Even if you haven't seen it, I personally don't feel it's acceptable to put up information that is inherently wrong, which is exactly what I did. That is also the reason why you won't find the video up anymore. I do not wish for an information incorrect video to stay up on my channel, even though that is a way that people can hold me accountable. You will find that anytime I have a situation like this, as I am doing here now, I am setting the precedent here and now. If you find that I've made a key mistake in one of these builds or another one of my videos, let me know. I will make an addendum or a full correction, remaking the video as I have done here, and you can be damn well sure that I will note that I made that mistake. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like and a comment down below. And please do subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more content like this. Furthermore, I encourage you to follow me on social media. Links are in the description down below for frequent updates. Note that currently I am only on Facebook and Minds, but very soon I will be joining Twitter and Gab as well for 2 additional ways for you to get updates in this time where YouTube's update system is far less than reliable. As always, friends and fellow gamers, it is my sincerest hope that you roll high, roleplay well, and game on. Have a fantastic day.